Hi, this is Ren.
This is KC, and this is All Walks of Comics. We're just talking a little bit about kind of what comics are we currently reading and currently into. We sort of talk a lot about like where comics and movies overlap, but we don't talk a lot about explicitly like what do we read and what do we like and what our interests are in.
Yeah, so I'm reading some comics right now. I'm mostly just playing the Mad Max game.
And I'm mostly playing the South Park game.
But some of the comics that I've read recently include Batman White Knight, which I really enjoy.
I really enjoy too, and I was pretty skeptical about it, honestly.
Yeah, I was too. I'm reading Dark Knight's Metal, which looks a lot cooler than what it actually is, but I'm still like sticking with it.
That's kind of how I feel. I was like, ooh, Dark Knight's Metal. It's kind of like a Justice League version of Thor Ragnarok. That looks awesome. And then I was reading it and I was like, oh, this is a little silly.
Yeah, I still have some hope for it, but the writing's not great. The artwork's really good.
Absolutely.
But, yeah.
Going back to White Knight for a second, the artwork is really good, but the writing is great. After Flashpoint Paradox, I've always thought, why isn't there, like a comic story arc that's specifically about what they were talking about in Flashpoint Paradox, where Bruce Wayne's dad becomes Batman and Bruce Wayne's mom becomes the Joker or something like that. And maybe there is a comic series of that somewhere that I just haven't come across. But White Knight is a little like that, where it's sort of a role reversal in the same way, where what if Batman is the villain and Joker is the hero? Kind of the fan theory of, is Batman the worst thing for Gotham? Is he specifically perpetuating more crime than he's actually helping to fix?
Yeah, it's really fascinating, and I know that some people have issues with it because they feel that it's like some sort of like SJW Batman, and like quite frankly I just don't see it that way.
Except for like one brief reference the news anchor makes to SJWs that's not pivotal to the plot or anything.
Yeah, it's not modern Marvel comics where they're like literally plugging in.
Oh,
like
DC does that too.
Yeah, wasn't there something about like Wonder Woman becoming like a biker and like beating up Nazis and stuff?
There was a thing about Wonder Woman, who, yes, is a bastion for racial and religious tolerance, but there was specifically a comic where she talks about how she is legally able to authorize marriages in every country on the planet, and she uses that legal ability to help same-sex couples get married, which I'm all for Wonder Woman, authorizing gay marriage, but I'm like, why in the world would you go through the trouble of being able to make that happen in every country on Earth? Are you serious? That's some dumbass shit.
Yeah.
Just say that it's like a spiritual thing or that she accepts it. You can write that into a story in a less, like, obnoxious way than that.
Yeah, I just got finished reading the limited War for the Planet of the Apes comics, which I really enjoyed. However, I was like really disappointed that it was so short.
Because it's only 404.
Yeah, and like it just feels like there could have been a little bit more world building, which seems like we're going to get a little bit more in the video game that's coming out.
The video game looks great.
Yeah, the video game kind of looks like a Telltale game.
With better graphics. Sorry,
yeah,
Telltale. I like you, but let's be honest.
And they're bugs. Oh god, they're bugs.
Yeah, I still like
they need to get some better programmers on their stuff.
Or possibly have more time.
It seems like they spend a lot of, but I don't know.
So what do you think of the War for the Planet of the Apes comics? I've read some of the ones that are based on the original series that I really like.
The War for the Planet of the Apes does some interesting world building as far as Bad Ape and Donkey is concerned. It doesn't really flesh out more characters other than that, which is a bit unfortunate.
It's kind of the Mad Max comic problem.
Yeah, a little bit.
Because the Mad Max Fury Road comics, that was another case where there were only 4 trade issues. One was about Furiosa and the Brides, which kind of became a little problematic when you looked at it in the context of the movie. Because it was like, was Furiosa originally a bride? Was she not? Because the comic brings that up as a possibility, but doesn't confirm it. Then there was a story about Nux and how he became a war boy and how he sort of became indoctrinated into this cult. And I think both of those comics are really great. You know, even the problems with the Furiosa and the Brides story aside, I think that's a really great comic. But then you had 2 that were specifically about Max's story with the little girl in the movie. And it's trying to bridge the gap between Thunderdome and Fury Road. And it does it in the worst possible way. And it also kind of goes against everything that Mad Max is in Fury Road 2. And it just becomes a thing of, like, you're trying to do too many things with too few pages and too little character development. You can't. This isn't expanding the story. This is shrinking it.
Yeah, there are some issues with that, with the War for the Planet of the Apes comics. Like, I still enjoy them to, like, a certain extent, but I don't really feel it as an expansion, more of, like, just a nice little accompaniment.
Yeah, but Planet of the Apes is pretty good about that. You know, you have the original series, you have the TV show, you have the reboot, you have the novelizations, and then you have the comics that are based on the original series, and then you have the comics that are based on the new series.
And it's a franchise that I would like to see expanded further. Whether it would just be an animated show, I'd be fine with that. I get that making movies that way is very expensive and risky, but I would like to see it continue in some way. If it's comics, I'm okay with that. I'm a little skeptical sometimes because comic writers are a dime a dozen, and there are a lot of comic writers that can't write very good stories.
Mm-hmm. Just for the record, are you Marvel or DC?
I am a DC person, which unfortunately right now, I know people love Wonder Woman. I don't get it. But right now I am just head in my hands about the DC movies because this is not DC to me. This does not feel like DC.
When the Lego Batman movie that's more poking fun at Batman than anything else feels more authentic than the actual DCU movies, that's a big problem.
I mean, I've gotten to the point now with DC movies where I'm just like, fuck it, make it all Lego. Make a Lego Flash movie, make a Lego Justice League movie.
Lego Batgirl! Lego Batgirl was great in the Lego Batman
Yeah, make
movie.
a Lego Batgirl movie. Like, you know, fucking make all of them Lego. I don't care. Like, you know, that seems like a much better idea than, you know, where they're going. And it's frustrating because I'm watching these Marvel movies and I'm not really a Marvel guy and I'm having a lot of fun with them. I'm a little partial right now to the new Fox Marvel movies because they seem to be taking like interesting risks. You know, we saw it with Deadpool, and then we saw it with Logan. Mm-hmm. It looks like we're going to be
off. Really interesting ideas that are paying off really well for them.
Yeah.
Commercially and critically.
Yeah. New Mutants looks really interesting. I think taking the X-Men into like the horror genre seems like a really interesting concept. I've also heard really good things. I haven't seen it yet, but The Gifted I heard was a really good show.
Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I've heard, but I haven't seen that Inhumans has a lot of problems.
Oh man, yeah.
Partly having to do with the source material, to be honest, but then like...
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a lot of comic adaptations that are coming out. I know that there's going to be a comic adaptation of The Boys, I think coming to Starz. Mm-hmm. Which Starz is like a no holds bar channel. It's a lot edgier.
Whether you like it or not.
Yeah, it's a lot edgier than even HBO.
Mm-hmm.
I've been enjoying what I've seen of American Gods. Haven't read the comic of American Gods.
Or the novel. It's a novel. Is it a comic?
Yeah, there is a comic series.
Okay,
of
so there's a
Gods.
novel and a comic and...
Yeah.
Okay. Well, speaking of comics that tie into, sort of adaptations of movies, I've been getting into the Power of the Dark Crystal comics. And I've literally been watching the Dark Crystal movie since before I was born. That's not an exaggeration. And I've been, kind of getting into some of the spin-offs. There's the Netflix movie, or the Netflix TV show that's going to come out pretty soon. But Tokyo Pop did like a manga series, and there was a novelization series. And it feels like every time you try to do a spin-off of the Dark Crystal, it's always prequels. It's all about the Gelflings. And then the Power of the Dark Crystal comic is actually a sequel. Jen and Akira are both in it, and they're like an old couple. And it's really interesting in how it's taking some of the ideas of the movie and expanding on it. Like, the protagonist is actually not a Gelfling. They're a Fireling, which is something that I don't think was even introduced in the movie at all. It's a completely new idea. And it's sort of like a story canon version of The Mutant, where it's like there's the prejudice against the Fireling because they see the fire and think that it's inherently harmful, but Therma can't help what they are, and it's really interesting in that capacity. But then there's also this interesting idea of, are Gelflings not innocent and pure and always in the right like they were portrayed in the movie? Are they actually discriminating against Firelings? And it's taking and Aughra is a character in it too, and Aughra's my favorite. And it's really interesting to see a comic where they're moving it forward and expanding beyond just Gelfling and Skeksis, even though Gelflings and Skeksis are both in the series. It's really interesting to see them move forward in a more progressive way that I really appreciate. Like, it feels like an expansion on the movie. That's still true to the movie, but more than that. And I really enjoy that. Besides that, I recently read World War Tank Girl, which Tank Girl has such a bad rep after the movie, which, by the way, was the first comic book adaptation to feature a woman and be directed by a woman. Some 12 years before the Wonder Model movie came out. Just saying. But I liked the Tank Girl comics a lot. And World War Tank Girl is really bonkers and a lot of fun. And kind of like sort of a stoner version of Terminator. Because there's like the time travel aspect, and one of the funny things is like when you time travel, you lose everything physical that you have on you. So like if you need to bring something with you, you kind of have to like smuggle it in, if you know what I'm saying. And it does seem kind of like, oh, it's a SJW, she's running around with a button on her jacket that says punch Nazis. But it's also very literal. She's running around buck naked in World War II taking out Nazis. Like, you gotta enjoy it just for like the goofy fun aspect of it. I think that it's a load of fun. I think it's just really enjoyable and bonkers. Like Tank Girl really is in her prime, I think. And then besides that, I recently read the Deadpool annual, the one with all the Deadpools, which is really great. It's like 4 issues. And it's actually a biannual because they had already published an annual earlier that year. But it was like talking about Deadpool's origin with... God, what's his name? I can't believe I can't remember his name. I'm so sorry, I'm spacing. But it's essentially like, if you ever notice that Deadpool speaks in 2 separate voices, he speaks in the white boxes and the yellow boxes. It's sort of like, how did he get to have the white box, and what is like this alternate voice in his head? I'll just leave it at that so there's no spoilers, I suppose. And there's like a story in it with Wolverine, and there's a story in it with like sort of Transformers with animals. There was actually a series, I think that this particular issue was sort of a spoof of. There was a TV show and toy line where it was like giant fighting robot dinosaurs that somehow never took off, even though it's giant fighting robot dinosaurs. I think it was trying to sort of spoof on that, but it's like, giant fighting robot Tillicum from SeaWorld. It's not SeaWorld and it's not Tillicum, but,
I mean, that just sounds like Beast Wars to me.
It is Beast Wars. It is Beast Wars.
Okay.
Anyway, that annual was a lot of fun. I got it for like $6, and I just picked it up, and I was like, fuck yeah, Deadpool. It's really a lot of fun. I will say, I've only gotten into comics like maybe in the past 5 years. I grew up a lot more with manga. That's just was kind of my jam. I think when I was a kid, I didn't read a lot of comics because I wasn't really gravitated towards the art style in a lot of cases at the time. I read a lot of Sunday Funnies. I read like all of the Calvin and Hobbes that exist. I've literally read every single published strip of Calvin and Hobbes many times over. I was into Peanuts. I was into like Foxtrot, that kind of thing. And then I started going to the library, and the one comic I was kind of into was ElfQuest, which is a little embarrassing because ElfQuest is very, very embarrassing.
Why is it embarrassing?
No, that does not age well. Like, it's cool when you're 8, but when you grow up and you're just like, oh god, this is so cheesy, and this is so stupid, and their waists are too tiny. Like, just as a point of fact, they're too tiny. But it was also, I picked up ElfQuest, and I kind of liked that, and then ElfQuest was sort of in the same section at my public library as Cardcaptor Sakura and Angelic Lair. Angelic Lair was like the first manga I'd ever read, and I really liked how it was sort of over the top and very, expressionistic. And I sort of just got into a lot of comics that way. Like, obviously a lot of big ones like Death Note, but then like Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service, Battle Angel Alita. I tried to sort of like go backwards and read contemporary stuff. Read a lot of Shonen Jump stuff in my lifetime. Zombie Powder I actually like a lot more than Bleach, which is sort of a controversial stance to take. But Zombie Powder is good. Like, Zombie Powder is really good, and it doesn't go on for 1,000,005 volumes. Full Metal Alchemist might be one of the best completed manga series out there, and I'm not talking about either of the anime TV shows, you guys. So then, like, it sort of took a while for me to get back into American comics and sort of see what the appeal of that was. But I do like a lot of older comics and newer comics and art styles. I like a lot of Neil Gaiman comics, like the tragical comedy and comical tragedy of Mr. Punch. I think Dave McKean's a really brilliant artist. One of my all-time favorite comics ever is Bone. I just think Bone is like sort of the end-all be-all of American comics for real. And even the spin-off like Rose and that kind of thing. And Warner Brothers has the right to come out with a movie adaptation. And I think it's going to be one movie. And Jeff Smith was like, I wish it was 2D animated, but Warner Brothers told me that they don't really make 2D animation anymore, so it's 3D. I'm like, fuck you, Warner Brothers, and your stupid half-ass animation with your new comic book adaptation movies, and fuck you for trying to do Bone right now, when you can't do the DCU. And even though I liked it, The Killing Joke looks like crap, and even though I liked it, Harley Quinn and Batman didn't look a whole lot better than The Killing Joke. Just like, you can do 2D animation. But really, I think, like, a Bone adaptation should be, like, sort of a Lord of the Rings style of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where you have live action mixed with animation. Like, if the Bones were animated, but then the humans were live action, I think that would be perfect. I think that would be, like, exactly what you needed. And then you could have sort of, like, the Beast monsters, and they could be sort of like the rotoscope monsters from Attack the Block. Which I was immediately, like, when I saw Attack the Block, I was like, it's the rat monsters from Bone! But you could totally do that, and that would be sweet. Like, you could have sort of the mix of different formats into one film, which is really hip right now. You could do that, and it would sell really well.
Yeah, so my introduction to comics mostly stemmed from, kids talking about Batman and Superman. The first superhero thing that I saw was The New Adventures of Lois and Clark, which was like romantic comedy show of Superman and Lois Lane. It didn't really age very well, but it was really cool that I got into Superman during the time of Doomsday.
Oh,
so
lucky.
So yeah, that was really
Before
interesting.
Doomsday became the dude from fucking Superman 4.
But like we had like a really weird time of Superman where like Superman split into like two different entities, and like one was electric and like transported through like telephone wires and all that kind of stuff. And
Was
like,
was this around the same time too, where there was the Superman and then there was the Superman clone in the 90s?
oh, this is after that.
Oh, this is after that. Okay.
Yeah, there was like this weird time where like, yeah, there were two different Supermans, and one was blue Superman, one was red Superman.
Was this
Yeah.
after the death of Superman? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was really weird. Obviously, I got into Batman because like, what
Who doesn't get into Batman?
Exactly.
I mean, Batman's fantastic. You know, you've got like the Long Halloween. You have like the Frank Miller Batman.
Yeah,
which,
I read The Long Halloween. I read The Dark Knight Returns,
Year One,
Year One.
and which was also a great movie. There are a lot of really good comic book animated movies. Like you have, I mean, I started watching the Batman animated series when I was in high school, and then you have like the Mask of the Phantasm, but then you have the Assault on Arkham, you have Year One, you have Flashpoint Paradox, you have the Wonder Woman animated movie that was just phenomenal.
Yeah, the DC animated movies.
Red Hood, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard is
Red Hood.
fantastic. I mean, I've heard nothing but rave reviews about Red Hood.
Like, I think their peak of animation really was like that time between Batman Year One and like The Dark Knight Returns and then Under the Red Hood and all that kind of stuff, where there's something about the animation style that I really liked. Assault on Arkham was also during that time. Assault on Arkham, like, if you didn't like the Suicide Squad movie, just watch Assault on Arkham.
And if you don't like the
Suicide Squad movie.
Yeah, it's the Suicide Squad movie that we all deserve. And if you
Yeah.
don't like the Wonder Model movie, then A, watch Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman, and B, watch the animated Wonder Woman movie, which does Wonder Woman all the justice that, honestly, she really needed in a film.
Yeah.
Not to say that we shouldn't have more Wonder Woman in the world, because yes, we absolutely should. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of interesting Batman films, and there's several like Justice League Batman films that I haven't seen as well. Because like, let's face it, like, you know, when you're talking about the Justice League, usually it's Batman and the Justice League, just like with
Though.
just like with Wolverine and the X-Men, like.
But that's always kind of been the joke. Anytime there's the X-Men, it's always sort of like how Batman doesn't fit in with the Justice League, you know?
Yeah. So I'm really excited to see where the White Knight goes. It's an interesting.
That's really promising right now.
Yeah, it's out of all the comics that I'm reading right now, that one definitely has a lot of promise. Also, the fact that it's a limited run makes it more engaging because they're higher stakes and everything. And one of the things I like about Batman is not everything has to be canonical. Things can be self-contained. And that kind of makes Batman a little bit more fun than a lot of other comics where it's like, oh, well, we have to have this universe match this, and like everything has to be.
Well, I mean, that's always been a thing with comics on both DC and Marvel, is like, how does time work, and how does the canon work, and how does consistency work? We don't know, because we're just trying to write comics and have fun.
Right, and
I'm not saying that to, like, piss on comic book writers, because they work very hard. I'm just saying, you know, you can't have comics that have been around for almost 100 years have perfect canonization, like, through all of time and all the different storylines and all the different writers, like.
Yeah.
Although sometimes I do get a little pissed when it's like, oh, but this isn't canon, and it's like, well, the point of having stories that aren't canon is to sort of see what these characters we know could do in other situations. Like, whenever I point out that in Injustice, Wonder Woman just kicks Superman's ass in a very graphically violent and satisfying way, people are always like, but that's not canon. And it's like, but it's still Wonder Woman versus Superman.
Yeah.
Just like, you know, White Knight, it's probably not canon, but it's the idea of what if, you know, we had these characters in a different situation, which is the whole point, I think, of comics versus movies or animated shows. I think with or live action shows even, because there's a lot of live action comics. Once you do that, you're setting up a specific world and it has to adhere to that world in your serial. But like with comics, you can have all sorts of like spin-off serials where things are, this character in this situation, and it works.
I mean, I really would like to see more comics expand the universe of a story and not just focus on specific characters. Like, sometimes I really just kind of want to delve into that. Like, Batman. There's no reason why Bruce Wayne always has to be Batman. Batman is an idea, not a specific character.
Right. Yeah. It's like, how many Robins do we have, but we only have one Batman?
Well, that's not true. We have several different iterations of Batman. Jim Gordon was Batman at one time.
Oh, shit.
Like, there are some interesting things that they're doing with the Batman comics.
Well, Bruce Wayne's dad was Batman at one time, too.
Right. And I would like to see that pushed more. Mm-hmm. Just because, like, you can explore ideas, but, like, after a certain point, you've done the idea to death, and it gets boring.
It's like, how many times in movies do we have to see Bruce Wayne's parents die? But we can't have one film version of Wonder Woman being born of clay. We have to just immediately dismiss that as
the whole thing,
not true, because that's what happened in the New 52.
New 52, it also happened in Rebirth. It's considered modern canon now that
but we never had a version where that was like a thing that we could have a cinematic like view of, and it's beautiful.
Well, we have to wait until Gal Gadot's run is over, and then we'll get another iteration of Wonder Woman that may or may not have that.
Boo. Boo, Wendy Testberger, boo. Because my life is literally South Park. I have a problem.
So what comic books are you reading? Let us know in the comments below, and thanks for listening.